You're sitting in your room again, phone in hand, thumb moving in that tired, rhythmic swipe. Left, left, right. A match, a hello, a carefully curated joke. You perform, they perform. You wait, you analyze. You wonder why, after months of this, you feel more exhausted than you did a year ago. You've been sold a story since childhood. Find your person, and the static finally clears. Build a life together, and you'll finally feel complete. But you're starting to notice the pattern. The conversations loop. The expectations multiply. The romance fades into logistics, compromise, and quiet resentment. And the worst part? You're beginning to suspect the script is broken. It's not broken because you're unlovable. It's broken because it was never designed to make you whole. It was designed to keep you chasing. What if the very pursuit of romantic partnership is the mechanism that guarantees your dissatisfaction? What if the cultural mandate to couple up isn't a path to peace, but a sophisticated trap that drains your time, dilutes your focus, and sells you a fantasy you'll spend decades trying to maintain? You've been told that solitude is a failure condition. You've been warned that if you don't pair off, you'll end up lonely, forgotten, irrelevant. But what if that warning is backwards? What if staying single isn't a compromise, but the highest form of intellectual and emotional sovereignty you can claim in a world addicted to distraction, performance, and emotional dependency? Arthur Schopenhauer saw through this centuries ago. He watched the theater of romance, dissected its machinery, and named it for what it truly is, a biological illusion dressed in poetry. He didn't romanticize loneliness. He didn't preach misanthropy. He observed the architecture of human desire and realized that peace doesn't come from finding another person to carry your burdens. It comes from understanding why you keep inventing new ones. Today, we're dismantling the myth that you need a partner to be complete. We're not here to comfort you with platitudes. We're here to arm you with clarity. You'll see why mainstream relationship advice fails you, why your nervous system is wired for longing, and why choosing deliberate solitude might be the most radical, life-preserving decision you'll ever make. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's also the only thing that'll set you free. Think about the last time you felt a surge of romantic excitement. Maybe it was a first date that went too well. Maybe it was the third message when the chemistry finally clicked. You felt a sudden expansion in your chest. The future suddenly seemed brighter, lighter, more manageable. You imagined shared apartments, quiet mornings, vacations with someone who finally understood you. You mistook that chemical spike for destiny. But it wasn't destiny. It was biology wearing a mask. Schopenhauer called it the genius of the species. You think you're choosing love for yourself. You think you're selecting a companion because your minds align, because your values match, because their laugh sounds like peace. Schopenhauer observed otherwise. The ultimate aim of all love affairs is more important than all other aims in a man's life. Hence it is that all of us take them so seriously. Why do we take them so seriously? Because the species doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about continuation. Romance is a neurological bribe. Dopamine floods your prefrontal cortex, oxytocin softens your boundaries, and serotonin drops just enough to make you feel obsessed. You interpret this as connection. Psychology interprets it as a reward loop engineered to override your rational judgment. Modern studies on hedonic adaptation confirm what Schopenhauer warned about in the 1840s. That initial euphoria has a half-life. Within 12 to 18 months, your baseline resets. The person you once couldn't stop thinking about becomes just another person in your kitchen. The conversations that felt profound now feel repetitive. The touch that felt electric now feels routine.
You didn't fall out of love, you simply stopped being drugged by it. You weren't built for permanent romance, you were built for pursuit. And pursuit, by definition, requires distance. Ask yourself honestly, how many of your relationships have followed the same arc? Intensity, integration, irritation, resignation. You pour yourself in, hoping this time it will stick. You compromise your schedule, your boundaries, your ambitions, believing that sacrifice proves devotion. But devotion to what? To a narrative that equates love with frictionless harmony? To a cultural script that tells you if you just communicate better, attend therapy, or buy the right book, the spark will return? It won't, not in the way you want it to. The spark isn't meant to sustain, it's meant to ignite. And once the ignition happens, the illusion drops. You're left with the raw material of two complex, flawed, autonomous human beings trying to coexist without consuming each other. Most people panic at this stage. They double down, they try harder, they attend workshops, schedule intimacy, and perform vulnerability on command. But the intelligent few recognize the pattern. They see the machinery. They realize that chasing romantic completion is like trying to fill a sieve with water. The faster you pour, the faster it drains. Schopenhauer put it plainly. The more intelligent a man is, the more difficult it is for him to find a partner who matches him. He wasn't speaking to intelligence as IQ. He was speaking to depth, to the capacity for sustained attention, to the refusal to confuse comfort with truth. When you operate at that level, partnership doesn't feel like salvation. It feels like a negotiation with gravity. You start to notice the cost of merging two separate orbits. You notice how much of your mental real estate gets colonized by another person's anxieties, preferences, and unresolved childhood scripts. You begin to understand completion was never the goal. Completion was the marketing.
Let's strip away the poetry for a moment and look at the mechanism. Human motivation operates on a simple, ruthless principle. Desire creates tension. Satisfaction removes it. Remove the tension long enough, and what's left isn't peace, it's emptiness. Schopenhauer described this as the pendulum of human existence. Life swings like a pendulum, backward and forward between pain and boredom. You want, you suffer. You obtain, you stagnate. You want again. The cycle doesn't break because you found love, it accelerates because now you've attached your suffering to another person's behavior. Watch how this plays out in modern relationships. In the beginning, there's longing. You text, you wait, you analyze their tone, you rehearse your responses, you experience the beautiful agony of uncertainty. It's painful, yes, but it's also stimulating. Your nervous system is engaged. Then comes union. You move in together, you share finances, you coordinate calendars. The uncertainty vanishes, so does the stimulation. What replaces it? Routine, predictability, the slow, quiet erosion of novelty. You start picking up on habits you once found endearing, now they grate. You start missing your own space. You start feeling claustrophobic in a house you paid for together. You wonder if you chose wrong. But you didn't choose wrong. You just experienced the pendulum. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. It's the brain's built-in neutralizer. No matter how positive the stimulus, your emotional system recalibrates to baseline within months. Lottery winners return to their previous happiness levels. Paraplegics adapt to their new reality. And couples who swear they've found forever return to their baseline emotional temperature, now with shared laundry and joint tax returns. The tragedy isn't that adaptation happens. The tragedy is that we blame each other for it. You think your partner changed. You didn't. Your perception just stopped being flooded with dopamine. You start chasing novelty to restart the cycle. Affairs, flirting with strangers, secret hobbies, quiet resentment. You tell yourself you're just exploring. You're not. You're running from boredom. and boredom for most people is more terrifying than pain. Schopenhauer knew this. He didn't romanticize suffering, but he respected its honesty. Pain tells you something is misaligned. Boredom tells you nothing is aligned. When you're in a partnership, you're forced to manage both. You negotiate the pain of compromise. You distract yourself from the boredom of predictability. You perform interest when you feel detachment. You schedule connection when you feel indifference. And slowly, you lose touch with your own internal rhythm. You start outsourcing your emotional regulation to another person's presence. You become dependent on their approval to feel stable. You trade autonomy for the illusion of security. Why do we accept this trade? Because society frames it as maturity. We're taught that independence in adulthood is a phase. Coupling is the destination. Solitude is the waiting room. But what if the waiting room is the only place where you can actually hear yourself think? Think about your most profound realizations. Did they come during a group dinner, a couple's retreat, a weekend trip with someone else's agenda? Or did they come during quiet hours, when the noise stopped, when you were finally alone with your own mind? That's not an accident. That's architecture. The human mind doesn't expand under constant negotiation. It expands under deliberate isolation. The pendulum will swing. It always does. You can spend your life trying to anchor it in the middle, performing contentment, managing expectations, and calling it love. Or you can step off the platform entirely. You can refuse to play the game that guarantees dissatisfaction. You can choose a life where your energy isn't split between managing your own desires and managing someone else's. You can stop swinging. You can start walking.
Let's talk about the hidden cost of intimacy. Not the financial cost, not the time cost. The cognitive and emotional tax you pay every single day you share your life with another person. You don't notice it because it's gradual. It's the slow erosion of your attention, the quiet dilution of your standards, the way you start softening your edges to avoid friction. You tell yourself it's growth. It's not. It's survival. Mainstream relationship advice tells you to communicate openly, set boundaries, and do the work. It sounds noble. It's also fundamentally flawed. It assumes that two autonomous adults can merge their lives without structural friction. They can't. Schopenhauer illustrated this with his famous hedgehog dilemma. A number of hedgehogs were one day cold and crowded close together to warm themselves by their mutual body heat, but soon they felt each other's prickles, which compelled them to separate. They need warmth. They also need distance. They move closer, get hurt. They move apart, get cold. They spend their lives oscillating between freezing and bleeding. That's you in modern partnership. You want closeness. Closeness triggers exposure. Exposure triggers defense. Defense triggers conflict. Conflict requires repair. And emotional labor is a currency most people overestimate their reserves for. You think you have unlimited capacity for patience, empathy, and compromise. You don't. You have a finite nervous system, and every unresolved tension, every unspoken resentment, every forced conversation drains it. Ask yourself, how much of your mental energy goes into anticipating your partner's moods? How much of your focus is spent decoding their silence, managing their triggers, or softening your truths to keep the peace? How many times have you swallowed your own discomfort to maintain harmony, only to wake up 3 years later feeling like a stranger to yourself? This isn't toxicity, it's compromise, and compromise is a slow leak. Psychology confirms this through attachment theory and ego depletion studies. The brain treats social friction as a threat. Every unresolved argument, every mismatched expectation, every moment where you choose politeness over honesty costs you cognitive bandwidth. Your prefrontal cortex gets hijacked by vigilance. Your working memory gets crowded with emotional accounting. You start making poorer decisions in your career, your health, your creative work, simply because your mental RAM is occupied by relationship maintenance. And yet we glorify this. We call it devotion. We romanticize the martyrdom of staying. We tell people who leave that they gave up too soon. But what if staying is the real surrender? What if the truly radical act is refusing to dilute your consciousness to accommodate another person's limitations? Schopenhauer was brutally clear about this. A man's true character is revealed in how he spends his solitude. He didn't mean physical isolation. He meant mental sovereignty, the ability to sit with yourself without flinching, the refusal to outsource your meaning to someone else's validation. When you pair up, you introduce a variable you cannot control: their moods, their traumas, their ambitions, their withdrawals. You tie your stability to a moving target, and when the target shifts, you adjust again and again and again until you forget what your baseline was. You weren't built to manage another person's inner weather. You were built to observe it, understand it, and decide whether it aligns with your own climate. If it doesn't, you don't negotiate, you separate, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Most people mistake intensity for depth. They mistake compromise for love. They mistake shared routines for shared purpose. But the intelligent few know the difference. Depth requires uninterrupted attention. Love requires mutual elevation, not mutual accommodation. Purpose requires alignment, not negotiation. And you cannot achieve any of these while constantly adjusting your spine to fit another person's shape. Let's go deeper. What actually happens to your brain when you choose deliberate solitude? Not isolation, not avoidance. Solitude. The conscious, voluntary withdrawal from compulsory social performance so you can restore your cognitive architecture. Modern neuroscience has mapped this with startling precision. When you're constantly engaged in social exchange, your brain operates in what psychologists call the social salience network. You're tracking micro-expressions, parsing tone, managing expectations, predicting reactions. It's exhausting. Your amygdala stays lightly activated. Your cortisol doesn't fully drop. Your prefrontal cortex gets interrupted every few minutes by another notification, another text, another emotional calibration. You call it connection. Your nervous system calls it chronic low-grade threat. Now, remove the variable. Choose solitude. Not the loneliness of abandonment, the solitude of selection. What happens? Your default mode network activates. This is the brain's introspective circuitry. It's responsible for self-referential thought, long-term planning, creative synthesis, and meaning-making. But it only functions optimally when external noise drops below a critical threshold. It cannot compete with the social salience network. They're neurologically antagonistic. You can't deeply know yourself while constantly reading someone else's. Studies on deep work and cognitive restoration confirm this. People who schedule uninterrupted solitary time show higher gamma-wave coherence, better memory consolidation, and increased neuroplasticity. They solve complex problems faster. They generate original ideas more consistently. They report lower emotional volatility and higher baseline satisfaction, not because they're happier, because they're clearer. Think of your mind like a radio. In a crowded relationship, you're constantly tuning to two frequencies at once. You hear static, you miss signals, you interpret interference as connection. In solitude, you dial the frequency down. The static clears. You finally hear the broadcast that was always playing underneath, your own thoughts, unfiltered, unedited, uncompromised. Schopenhauer understood this long before fMRI machines existed. The two poles of human happiness are pleasure and peace. Pleasure belongs to the young, peace to the old.
He wasn't talking about age, he was talking about depth. Pleasure is external. It requires stimulation. It fades. Peace is internal. It requires stillness. It compounds. When you pair your life with another person, you optimize for pleasure. Shared experiences, synchronized schedules, mutual validation. It feels good, until it doesn't. When you choose solitude, you optimize for peace. You build a life that doesn't require constant calibration. You become self-sustaining. This isn't misanthropy, it's neurology. You're not rejecting people. You're rejecting the structural inefficiency of merging two independent nervous systems into one shared operating system. You're refusing to split your attention between your own evolution and someone else's maintenance. You're choosing the conditions under which your mind can actually think. And thinking is the only activity that outlasts the body.
So what do you actually do? How do you navigate a world that treats singlehood as a waiting period rather than a destination? You don't isolate yourself in bitterness. You don't reject connection entirely. You restructure it. You move from compulsory intimacy to deliberate engagement. You stop treating romance as the center of your life and start treating it as one optional room in a much larger house. Mainstream advice will tell you to keep your standards high while still participating in the dating market. It's a contradiction. You cannot maintain sovereignty while auditioning for partnership. The moment you enter the marketplace, you're forced to perform, to optimize, to shrink yourself into a palatable shape, to compete. You tell yourself you're looking for the right one. You're really looking for validation that you're still desirable. That's not seeking love. That's seeking proof of worth. And proof of worth is a debt that never stops accruing. The intelligent few do something different. They step off the stage. They stop performing availability. They redirect their energy inward. They build lives that don't require an audience to feel meaningful. Schopenhauer prescribed this clearly. A man's own self is the only true companion of his life. He who is rich in himself needs least from without. He wasn't advocating for emotional starvation. He was advocating for intellectual abundance. When you cultivate depth, solitude ceases to be a void. It becomes a sanctuary. Here's the practical framework. First, stop outsourcing your emotional regulation. No partner can carry your unprocessed wounds. No relationship will fix your relationship with yourself. Therapy, journaling, physical discipline, creative practice, these are non-negotiables, not supplements. Build your foundation before you invite anyone to inspect the walls. Second, schedule solitude like a sacred commitment. Treat it with the same respect you'd give a business meeting, a medical appointment, a flight. Block the time. Turn off the notifications. Refuse the guilt. Your mind requires uninterrupted space to integrate. Give it the space. Third, engage socially on your terms. You can still love people. You can still have friends, collaborators, mentors, fleeting connections. But you choose the dosage. You set the boundaries. You leave when the friction outweighs the value. You don't stay out of obligation. You participate out of alignment. Fourth, redirect the biological drive. The will to life doesn't disappear when you stop dating. It transforms. Channel it into craft, into study, into physical mastery, into building something that outlives you. Obsession is just undirected energy. Give it a direction. Fifth, reject the cultural script that equates partnership with success. You will be asked, politely or passively, why you're still alone. You will be pitied. You will be misunderstood. Let them. Their confusion is not your responsibility. Your clarity is your own. Most people think singlehood is deprivation. It's actually curation. You're not losing out, you're filtering out. You're trading the chaos of merged orbits for the precision of a single trajectory. You're choosing quality of attention over quantity of affection. You're choosing peace over the performance of pleasure. Schopenhauer wrote, "Solitude is the lot of all exceptional minds." Exceptional doesn't mean famous. It means unwilling to settle for the mediocre, unwilling to confuse comfort with truth, unwilling to trade depth for the illusion of belonging. When you embrace that, you don't lose love. You redefine it. You stop demanding it from others. You start cultivating it within yourself.
Let's be brutally honest. Choosing singlehood will not cure you of human longing. You will still feel the ache for connection. You will still experience moments of quiet isolation. You will still watch couples on the street and wonder briefly what it would feel like to share your life with someone who chooses you as fiercely as you choose yourself. That's normal. It's biology. It's memory. It's the ghost of a script you were taught before you could question it. But here's the difference. You no longer mistake the ache for a command. Depression tells you you're unworthy of love. Nihilism tells you love doesn't exist. Schopenhauer's clarity tells you love is real, but it's not the center of existence. It's a current. You can swim in it. You don't have to drown in it. Liberation doesn't come from killing desire. It comes from understanding it, from seeing the machinery without being controlled by the gears, from recognizing that longing is a signal, not a sentence. You start to notice the freedom in not performing availability, the relief in not scheduling your worth around someone else's attention, the quiet power of saying no to a date because you'd rather read, train, write, or simply sit in silence with your own thoughts. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop shrinking to fit rooms you never wanted to enter. You stop confusing loneliness with emptiness. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted isolation. Solitude is the peace of chosen withdrawal. One drains you, one restores you. How do you navigate a couple-obsessed world without bitterness? You observe it like a philosopher. You watch the patterns, you see the compromises, you notice the quiet resignations masked as contentment. You feel empathy, not contempt. You understand that most people aren't choosing partnership out of depth, they're choosing it out of fear. Fear of silence, fear of irrelevance, fear of facing themselves without a mirror. You don't judge them, you simply decline to join them. Schopenhauer observed, peace is the only thing worth having. He didn't mean the absence of conflict, he meant the presence of alignment. When your external life matches your internal reality, you stop fighting, you stop pretending, you stop negotiating with your own conscience. You build a life that doesn't require justification. You sleep without rehearsal. You wake without dread. You move through days that feel yours, not borrowed. This isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of honesty. You stop demanding others fill gaps that only you can close. You stop treating people as projects. You stop romanticizing sacrifice. You start respecting limits, yours, theirs, the world's. You become lighter because you stop carrying what was never yours to hold. You are not broken because you prefer your own company. You are not failing because you refuse to perform intimacy. You are not behind schedule. You are awake. And waking up in a sleeping world will always feel like isolation until you realize you're just seeing clearly for the first time. Here is what they won't tell you. You don't need to be chosen to be complete. You don't need to be paired to be purposeful. You don't need to perform devotion to prove your worth. The entire architecture of modern romance is built on a single unexamined premise: that you are insufficient as you are, that your solitude is a defect, that your independence is a phase, that your peace is temporary until someone arrives to validate it. It's not temporary, it's foundational. You were never meant to outsource your stability. You were never meant to split your attention to feel whole. You were never meant to trade your sovereignty for the comfort of shared routines. The pendulum will swing, the species will push, the culture will pressure, the apps will ping, the narratives will loop. But you have the one thing they don't: awareness. You can see the mechanism, you can name the illusion, you can step off the platform. Accept it. Most relationships are negotiations disguised as destiny. Accept it. Most people partner out of fear, not depth. Accept it. You cannot build a life of clarity while constantly adjusting to another person's chaos. Accept it. Solitude is not a waiting room. It is the workshop. It is the studio. It is the laboratory where you become yourself. You don't have to reject connection to honor your independence. You just have to stop making it mandatory. You don't have to become cynical to become clear. You just have to stop confusing compromise with love. You don't have to isolate to be free. You just have to stop performing availability for an audience that doesn't pay attention anyway. Stop fighting reality. Accept the biology. Accept the pendulum. Accept the cost of merging two orbits. Accept the gift of a single trajectory. Accept that peace is not found in another person's presence. It's found in your own alignment. Accept that you are enough, not as a slogan, as a structure. Build on it.
If this resonated, you already know what comes next. The real work doesn't happen in the comments. It happens in the silence, in the hours you reclaim, in the boundaries you stop apologizing for, in the life you start building when you finally stop waiting for permission to be yourself. Write in the comments, "It made sense to me." Not for validation, for alignment. Let the algorithm know you're awake. Subscribe if you're tired of being managed by narratives. Turn on notifications if you'd rather face the truth than be comforted by it. You don't need to be chosen. You just need to choose yourself. And when you do, everything else falls into place.